Chapter 31. It's the middle of the night, but no one is in our house, in our sleep. Moni feeds me a meal, and then I bathe and rest. Now I come out of my room ready to talk. The family's in the sitting room waiting for me, but not impatient. They'd waited all night. Moni brings cups of tea. She changed out of her white dress the minute she stopped hugging me when I first arrived. Now she's wearing her old brown dress and the dragon pin too. She looks beautiful. Sunhee is so excited. She sits next to me, then moves to sit across from me, and then back again. And Abjui hugs me too when he first saw me. He hasn't done that since I was a small child. I looked at all of them smiling, and I can't stop smiling. Well, I said, here I am, back from the dead. I want to tell you everything that's happened to me, but I hardly know where to begin. I guess I'll start with what happened after I wrote my last letter. That's a kamikaze tradition, you know. You write a letter, address it to yourself, to the family of the late, whatever your name is. It was a funny feeling writing that, as if I was already dead. Everyone laughs. I can't remember the last time we all laughed together. I go on. I don't want to bore you with all the technical details, but you should know that the special attack plane carries very little fuel. This is because the bombs are so heavy that if the fuel tank were full, we wouldn't be able to take off. They calculate the exact amount of fuel to make it to the target site, not one drop more. We get our orders a few days before, and we're waiting for the weather to clear. Finally, in the dead of night, we got the command to depart. It was still pretty cloudy that morning, but they told us the sky would clear up soon. They were wrong, those weather people. It never did clear up. The sky was absolutely solid with clouds, and the farther we flew, the worse it got. I was in a squad with 4 other planes. The leader signaled to us to return to the base. There was no way we'd ever find the target in this weather. I shake my head remembering. We felt so ashamed. Here we'd gotten ourselves prepared to die. The whole base had turned to send us off. We'd written our letters and everything. The letters had already been collected and sent. Somebody takes care of that as soon as the planes leave. So there we were, supposedly having accomplished this great mission, and instead we're going to have to go sulking back to the base without having reached our target site. I looked at Abjui. I had a plan all along, you know. Those attacks were so difficult to accomplish. In fact, I don't know how they did it. The ones who succeeded in their missions, most of the planes ended up getting shot down or else crashing into the ocean, missing their targets completely. Or that's what I planned to do. I'd fly out with my squad, and it would look like I was attempting an attack. But I knew if I were to dive my plane just a few degrees off target, I'd miss, and it would still like I'd try to hit it, I grinned. It would have been a double feat. I'd have done no damage to the Americans, and I'd have taken out a Japanese plane. Beside me, Sunhee gasped, and she's looking at Abjui. He nods at her, but neither of them says anything. So I go on. The clouds ruined everything. If I'd started a dive then without any ship around for a target, they'd have to know what I was up to. I take a sip of tea. I wasn't that I lost my nerve. I stop again, my face growing warm. Well, maybe a little. I can still feel it sitting on that plane shaking with fear, trying to pretend it was only the engine shaking me. I speak quickly, getting past that part. The main thing was, if they knew for sure I was a traitor, they might make things really hard for the family. So I flew back with my squad, all that planning for nothing. And when we got back to the base, we were thrown into jail for failing to accomplish our mission. I shake my head again, still hardly believing it, like the weather was our fault. Anyway, we were kept there for several weeks. No trial, nothing. It was like everyone had forgotten about us. I pause for a moment. Then I stand up, drop to my knees, and make a formal bow. I apologize to my family, I say, my face still at the floor. I realized you'd gotten that last letter, and you all thought I was dead. It drove me crazy that I had no way of letting you know that I was still alive. I apologize for the pain I caused you. A moment silent. Then, there's no need for apology, Abjui says, his voice cracking in mid-sentence. I sit up again and see his face. His eyes are wet. I clear my throat. On the day we were released, with no explanation, eventually we all learned about the bombs and that the Emperor was preparing to surrender. Then we were all demobilized and sent home. Moni let out a long sigh, like she's been holding her breath for years. Everyone's quiet for a few moments. No questions, not even from Sunhee. But it turns out she's only waiting, making sure that our parents aren't going to talk. Then, Opa, what was it like to fly? I can't keep myself from grinning. Sunhee, you can hardly imagine it. The first time I went as a student, someone else flew the plane. I was supposed to pay attention to what he was doing, but it wasn't easy. All I wanted to do was look out the window. The houses were so tiny, you could see the shadows made by the clouds in the ground. Imagine being higher than a cloud. The next few times I flew, I was so busy paying attention to controls that I couldn't look out the windows. There are so many things to think about. Your altitude, the speed, the effect of the wind, your direction, keeping the plane steady. But after a few flights, I could handle the plane pretty well, so I could look over the countryside from time to time. It's an odd feeling. The plane's so small inside, and you're all cramped up, as if you're in a box made of metal, and all the engine is very noisy. But in spite of that, you feel so free, like there's nothing but air and space around you. It's truly a miracle. You feel almost like God. Suddenly, I feel really tired. Julie seems to sense it. He clears his throat. Enough talk for tonight, my son. We should all sleep now. He smiles broadly at us, longest at me. We have plenty of time to talk in the days to come. That hellhole of a prison, I haven't told them anything about that, and I won't either. There's not much to tell. It was filthy, with bad food, sometimes no food. But other than shoving a dirty dish of scraps at us once a day, the guards left us alone. Sometimes I wondered if anyone but the guards knew we were there. I can remember lying in that cell, not sleeping much. You had to keep kicking the rats off your legs. I thought about home a lot and played games like trying to remember every single thing in my room, or meals, remembering all my favorite foods. Home seemed so far away, almost like it wasn't real, like a dream. But here I am now, home. Amoni's cooking, rice again, the American stuff. It's different. It doesn't stick together the way Korean rice does, which makes it harder to eat with chopsticks. But still, it's rice. Sunhee's questions. Every time I see her, she's asking me something about flying or training or Japan, and I don't even mind. But after the first few days, I start to feel restless, almost like I don't belong here. How can that be? This is my home. The trouble is, I don't know what I'm going to do. I'm busy enough now. Abjui asked me to help at his school, cleaning up the classrooms, repairs, stuff like that. He hopes to open it again very soon. I'm glad to help, glad to have something to do. When the school's ready, then what? Go back to school myself? I don't feel like a student anymore. I can't see myself back in a classroom. A job then, but what kind of job? I'm a pilot now, I'm proud of it. But what good is that in a town where there aren't any planes? Not a single plane has ever landed on an airstrip. The war was a terrible thing. But during the war, I had something to do, something really important, and flying was the most exciting thing I've ever done. Now the war was over. Everything's supposed to be better, but it isn't, not for me. I've been home a couple weeks. One evening, everyone is in the sitting room. Amoni and Sunhee sewing. Abjui reading, me whittling. We get together like this almost every evening now. Funny how the war made ordinary things seem special again. But something's wrong tonight, with me. The restless feeling. I just can't settle down. I'm whittling, but not making anything. Just shaving off bits and pieces of woods. Abjui's looking through one of Uncle's newspaper. He draws his breath in a little. Look at this, he says. An article openly critical of the Japanese economic policy, written at the height of the war. It actually accuses officials in the government by name. He shakes his head admiringly. It took great courage to write and publish such an article. Before I know it, I'm on my feet. My knife and the piece of wood clatter to the floor, and I'm shouting without even thinking. What right do you have to speak of courage? His face, not angry, but stunned. Tayula, he begins. I don't want to hear what he has to say. I turn my back on him and run out the door. All evening I walk through town, up and down, street after street, thinking over and over, my father is a coward. The years of the occupation and then the war, all the terrible things the Japanese did to us. And what had Abjui done? Nothing. He kept his head down, buried himself in his books, let the Japanese do whatever they wanted. Sure, there were times that was the smartest thing to do, maybe the only thing to do, but there were ways to fight back, and Abjui hadn't even tried. Not like Uncle. Uncle done something big. The newspaper, I've imagined it hundreds of times. Him printing the paper in some dark basement somewhere, fixing the press when it broke, getting the paper out when no one else could have done it. That's what I wanted to do, something big. I had it all planned, and it would have worked too, except for the weather. Damn clouds. Going back to the base in disgrace. A disgrace to the Japanese for failing in the attack. A disgrace to myself for failing in my own plan. Am I a complete failure? At least I didn't help them capture Uncle. That was something, but probably not. When I really think about it, Uncle is too smart. He'd never let them catch him. So in the end, I haven't done anything. Nothing at all. Just like Abjui. How can I live with a father I don't respect? And if I'm just like him, how can I live with myself? Everyone's in bed when I get home. I tiptoe into the house. The door to my room squeaks when I slide it open. I hold my breath. No sound. No one getting up. Good. I still don't want to talk to anyone. I don't bother to turn the light off. I know I won't be able to sleep. I lie down on my mat and stare up at the ceiling. For minutes. Hours? I don't know. A rustle at the door. Sunhee. She comes in without asking and stands with her arms crossed, glaring at me. What do you think this is what Uncle would want? She says, whispering fiercely so her parents won't hear. For you to show such disrespect to Abjui? I sit abruptly. What does he deserve my respect? I am careful to whisper too, but I can't keep the anger out of my voice. Why should I respect a coward? There, I've said it out loud. My breath is coming hard now. Do you know sometimes I think he is worse than the Chilapa? At least they did something. At least they took a stand. He was like a worm burrowing into the ground. I hope all the bad things would go away. How can I respect such a man? It's hard to believe he and Uncle are from the same family. Sunhee stares at me for a moment. Then she hands me a newspaper and points at something in the middle of the page. That article there, she said, the one about education. I glance at the headline. What about it? I'm angry at her too now. He wrote that, she says, Abjui. For a moment, I don't think I've heard her right. I look at her, and I look down at the paper again. This time I really look at her. How do you know? I ask. I just know, she says. He said the exact same to me, almost exact same words. You don't have to believe me, she adds stubbornly, but I know I'm right. I'm sure he didn't put his name on the articles because he wanted to protect us. A long moment of silence. He wrote this, I whisper. Yes, she answered. I'd been through all the papers. Abjui started writing after Uncle left. The whole world turned upside down, like going into a spin in a plane. Everything inside out, backward, reversed, but you still have to make your brain work. Abjui wrote articles for Uncle's paper. He must have used his position at the school to obtain information and made regular contact with the resistance so the articles could be printed by Uncle. Suddenly, I remember the nighttime raid. It must indeed have been his work they were looking for. He'd been in danger that night, every night. But he'd never shown a single sign of it. He'd gone to work, come home, studied in his room, or so I thought. But he must have been writing those articles, and I never knew. Why didn't he tell me? I'm asking myself, as much as I'm asking her. She kneels on the floor beside me. The same reason that Uncle didn't tell him. It was safer that way. But why now? I mean, when I got home, when the war was over. Why didn't he say anything then? She shakes her head and speaks gently. That isn't his way, Oppa. He did what he did, but he felt no need to talk about it. I look at the paper again. My eyes start to feel hot, and the print slowly goes all blurry.